Minister Cleary in the department. So let me talk to the Minister and come back to you, Deputy Costello.
Look, there is a commitment in the programme for government in relation to sanctions for contempt of court violations against social media companies. You'll recall, Taoiseach, back when the last time I was a backbencher, I brought forward a private member's bill in relation to contempt of court. It's really important that we prevent any conduct that abuses, prejudices or indeed obstructs the administration of justice. It's absolutely right to move this forward. In the programme, something that has been pushing the UK since 1981. Here from the Reform Commission to, if we look back to the Jobstown years ago, it's not something we want to see again, and I would ask that it be expedited in the programme for government through this administration. Thank you.
Minister. Deputy Madigan for raising this issue, which I know she's had a long-standing interest. I'm very eager that any outstanding issues in the programme for government are addressed. I'm sure Mr. Mash on this, and I'll get an update from her for you.
Minister, our Taoiseach, I'm glad the Minister for Social Protection is beside you and she'll be able to answer this. She recently announced changes on job seekers related benefit, and I was contacted by a woman from Mayo that has worked 30 hours a week cleaning a school for 8 years. Every summer she's forced to sign on. She told me that she some payments. Something has to be done. No will be left without pay during, and I want to ask you the changes related benefits the many in her situation. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm announced that approval from Cabinet for job seekers job employment. I think that that's a step in the right direction, is to protect people so that they won't have a cliff edge drop in their income if they're unfortunate enough to lose their job. This evening, legislation through the Dáil. I take on that those particular people that are laid off during the summer, and I will certainly outline those issues when I'm addressing the Dáil later.
Thank you, Minister. All right. Thank you. Deputy Willie O'Dea, please.
The Taoiseach will be aware that the government will be seeking the Attorney General referendum will be necessary to impact or treat sign up to the EU. Has the Attorney General would the Taoiseach changes a constitutional referendum is required, that the matter should still be, the opinion of the people should nevertheless still be canvassed? I mean, there is provision in the Constitution, Article 47 specifically, for referendums to take place on matters that don't involve an amendment to the Constitution.
Taoiseach.
Thanks to Deputy O'Dea. In relation to the WHO pandemic treaty, I'll just have to seek an update from the Minister for Health in relation to that. I'm not aware personally of any advices in regards to that. In relation to the immigration, I am very confident of the ability of the government and the House of the Oireachtas to opt in, and there being no legal requirement for a referendum. Certainly in relation to that, we're not proposing one, but we are proposing plenty of time in this House for people to debate through the provisions, tease through it. We obviously also provided extra time to the at their request to consider.
Very much. That concludes questions on promised legislation. We move now to a motion report of the Benefit Act, extension of leave or more, and I Minister Gorman to move the motion. Is the motion agreed? To support the statement in Ireland of the, and I want to ask you to join extend a very warm Cade's message to someone who is familiar to us all here, Dr. Jilan Abdallah Maljid, Ambassador of Palestine. You're very, very welcome. And as we proceed to take the debate, can I just say a word or two of caution, please? We will in this debate understandably want to express our horror at what I think has correctly described as the depravity that we have for several months now taken in Palestine, and indeed the of the south of in Israel. I do need to make it very clear here. We clearly differ and the Palestinian people, and them discriminate. The government of Israel and the Jews and Israel. I think, particularly as we speak, about the very small but treasured Jewish community that we have in this country, that we value, that we treasure, and that we do not want to feel in any way undermined by our justifiable criticism of unthinkable acts of depravity that we have seen happening. I need to bear in mind that call on the on this matter.
Thank you for your endorse. Last Wednesday, Minister Ryan, we announced that Palestine alongside our partners in Spain and Norway. The government to that decision. Former state colleagues in Oslo have taken the same step. This shows our commitment in the programme for government to the time right. We have said that our recognition as part of a process lead to peace on the basis. As the House knows, unfortunately, 3 decades on from the Oslo process, we are perhaps further than ever from a just, sustainable and comprehensive peace settlement, one that can bring peace and security to the people of Palestine, to the people of Israel and to the people of the wider region. In these circumstances, it would not have been right to withhold our recognition when we were convinced that it was the right thing to do. Not unreasonable, if not now. Today, in the most of circumstances, as we witness a humanitarian catastrophe continuing to unfold in Gaza and in Rafa. We see children starving. We see children going to bed not knowing they will wake up. And we see new despicable end. Now and again, an event of particular horror takes place, and the Israeli Prime Minister then apologises for the tragic mistake. As I've said, April's tragic bombing of aid workers provided to starving Gazans. The tragic mistake was children and families who had fled to a designated safety in truly scenes. What will June's tragic mistake be? And more importantly, what are we all in this world going to do to stop it? As I've consistently said, there is an onus on every country and on the European Union to use every lever at our disposal to bring about a ceasefire. It is no longer enough just to condemn. It's no longer enough just to be repulsed. That's why I welcome the decision of the Belgian Presidency to convene a meeting on the EU-Israel Association Agreement. The human rights clauses in that agreement are and must be meaningful, and when not being adhered to, that too must have consequences. We need to look at all the levers at our disposal to bring about a cessation of Netanyahu's mistake. Formal recognition of this Palestine Day is a political and symbolic. And I hope the Palestinian people suggest their darkest hour, Ireland stands with it. It is an expression of our view that Palestine holds and should be able to vindicate the full rights of a state, including self-determination, self-governance, territorial integrity and security, as well as recognising Palestine's own obligations under international law. Generations of Palestinians have endured occupation, dehumanisation and humiliation. In today's West Bank, we see an extreme form of Zionism fuel violence and appropriation of land, actions that largely go unchecked. In Gaza, since last October, we have seen tens of thousands die, many of them children. Life. We've seen schools, hospitals, cultural institutions, religious buildings reduced to rubble, and infrastructure destroyed, turned on place to place. The very least we can do is let them know suffering is not unnoticed and that it will be acted upon. Last week I said, recognition is a message to those in Palestine who advocate and work for a future of peace and democracy, that we fully respect your aspirations to be living freely in your own country, in control of your own affairs, under your own leadership. I said that moving in lockstep with our European colleagues, we sought to be bearers of hope. I wanted to reaffirm that it is possible that justice is the only peace. You cannot have a two-state solution without. We have long recognized and its right to exist peace and security within internationally agreed borders. Today we say we equally recognise the state of Palestine and its right to exist within internationally agreed borders. When I spoke to President Abbas last Wednesday, he thanked Ireland, Spain and Norway for our leadership in recognising the state of Palestine, and he praised our decision as one of a beacon of hope to the Palestinian people. But our history is not just about hope and symbolism, notwithstanding their importance. For me, recognition also serves three fundamental purposes. Firstly, it is at a time Palestine takes its place among the free nations of the world, that it can pursue self-determination, self-governance, fulfil its obligation and avail of its rights under the UN Charter, and that it might have territorial integrity and sovereignty. Secondly, it expresses our belief that Israelis and Palestinians alike have a right to self-determination, safety, security and dignity. No child any less than another. Thirdly, it cements our fundamental that the only just solution to the Israeli-Palestinian generation-long conflict is a two-state solution. Ireland, Spain and Norway are not alone in our recognition of Palestine. 3/4 of UN member states already do. The two-state solution is an idea. It has long been of nations through several UN councils. Palestine has long been seen to take the rightful nations of the world, and as national organization UNESCO and the free countries of the world agree. Of them voted earlier for UN membership. Ever increasing legal settlements and Palestinians have the viability of the state hanging by a thread. If countries do not now take this formal step to recognise Palestine, I fear there may not be the opportunity in the future. Now is the time to act. The 1967 borders have slowly been eaten away, and this cannot continue. Recognition says to young Palestinian people growing up in Gaza and the West Bank or in refugee camps around the region that there is a viable political path to achieve your dream of a Palestinian state, that there are goodwill in Ireland who will stand with you, show you get there. Rewards those with the political on this island. Vital that support can be. The most right-wing has said that will accept a Palestinian state. The government have been strongly critical of our decision. It has wrongly sought to portray it as a reward for terrorism and a boost for Hamas. This could not be further from the truth. We have been clear, time and time again, that we utterly reject Hamas and all that it stands for. As I said last week, Hamas can no suffering and the people of Palestine. I'm disappointed to conduct its following our decision. Diplomatic respect is something to uphold. On the record of the Dáil, praise Ambassador Sonia McGuinness and her colleagues for their dignity and their professionalism with which they conducted themselves and I want to thank her for the way in which she conducted herself in representing the views of Ireland and the Irish people. Lines of communication must be kept open if we're able to explain and understand decisions. That's why I welcomed the recent opportunity to speak directly to President Herzog. Pursuing a peace based on shared fundamental values as enshrined in the UN Charter, it is the ultimate way in which we deal. It's how we deal with evil, terrorist ideology and those who share that way of thinking. And let me be clear once again, Ireland unreservedly condemns the despicable actions of Hamas. We cannot begin to pay hostage and the family in return to the honor of their lives. But it does no harm to Israel. We wish nothing for the people of Israel but security, peace and freedom. That's why we're obliged to speak up when we think the path. The release of urgent access to Gaza. On Friday, the Minister of Justice said that it must immediately halt its military offensive in the Rafa governorate, which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza's conditions of life that could bring about the physical destruction in whole or in part. The situation could not be more grave. The stakes could not be any higher. The ICJ's orders are legally binding. Israel must immediately comply. Ceann Comhairle, we're not. We know that recognition will not solve the conflict between us, but it can make a real and meaningful contribution. We must be on the right side of history. It is a single step in a long and difficult path, a path Ireland is ready to walk towards a future where there are Israel and Palestine in peace and security together. Palestine both take place on the world stage. We want Israelis and Palestinians to know that there can be an end to this conflict, that peace is possible. We know that most Israeli people and Palestinian people want their children to be able to live in peace and security. And for all of this to happen, the fighting, the killing, the barbaric actions need to stop. So I want to conclude today by reiterating my statement from last week to Palestine, in the West Bank, in Gaza, camps, in Ireland, in the day, around the world. We here in Ireland, we see you, we recognise you, we respect you, and today formally recognises the state of Palestine. Gur Magat.
Kinne stoi dinig in starú agus táchtach é seo agus is son chana mar an kinne. Is ceart agus is cóir a. This morning, the state of Palestine. It is an occasion of not only to deputies in this House, but to the people of Ireland and to the people of Palestine. Much thought and diplomatic effort has informed the timing and context of this decision. Let me first emphasise that some considerations have never been in any doubt. Our commitment to and to the full of a two-state solution, the UN Security Council and UN, our Palestinian people's right to self-determination vindicated. Our dream, this future generations of Palestinian people will enjoy a peaceful and secure existence, living side by side in peace. Our commitment to supporting Palestinian state building and the development of Palestinian institutions throughout our development cooperation programme. The deep ties between the Irish and Palestinian people at every level and in every sector of our society. In this spirit, I know that recognising the state of Palestine has been heard by the Palestinian people as a clear expression of solidarity, and I want to join with colleagues in welcoming the Palestinian head of mission and soon-to-be full ambassador, Dr. Gillian Dal-Majid, to the House. I know that it's a special day for you. On behalf of the Palestinian people. Many Palestinians have decisions has provided hope at what is a very dark time in Palestine, most obviously in Gaza, also in the West Bank. It's my firm belief that in recognising the state of Palestine at this time, the impact it can make to translate into reality. Ceann I will return to the issue of recognition in more detail shortly. Before doing so, it's important to reflect upon the shocking reality in Palestine. Earlier this month, following weeks of warnings, the World Food Programme indicated that northern Gaza is now experiencing famine. Just over a week ago, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court applied for arrest warrants for leaders of Hamas, as well as for the Israeli Prime Minister and Israeli defence. Last Friday, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to, quote, immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafa governorate which may inflict upon the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, unquote. The court characterised recent developments, in particular Israel's offensive in Rafa, as exceptionally grave. It ordered the immediate opening of the Rafa crossing for humanitarian aid and the facilitation of access to UN investigation. See the heart of the airstrikes on Rafa on Sunday. Dozens of innocent sheltering in a camp for displaced people. We see an entire population, 90% of whom are being displaced at least once, and many multiple times, that is acutely food insecure, unable to access healthcare, education, or the most basic of social services. We continue to be launched by Hamas towards Israel, targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure, emphasising again the nation's utterly malign intentions and role. Separate from the savagery, the unimaginable ordeal of Israeli families continues. Again, restate my utter condemnation of what Hamas did that day. Visit to the region in April, I saw firsthand the obstacles and restrictions facing aid entering into Gaza via Rafa. I also discussed humanitarian access in detail with my Egyptian and Jordanian counterparts. The challenges they outlined have been compounded further since then by the Israeli offensive in Rafa and indeed Hamas rocket attacks, which have disrupted the flow of aid at both the Kerem Shalom and Rafa crossing points. By repugnant attacks on aid trucks from Jordan as they drive through Israel without effect by the Israeli, by the continued lack of proper deconfliction inside Gaza. Universally, partners urged Israel not to proceed with its offensive in Rafah and to ensure full, safe and unhindered humanitarian access to Gaza. Israel has chosen to disregard these calls and not choose to disregard the orders of justice. These are legally binding. We discussed all an excellent and informal meeting between the European Union and Ireland. We agreed to convene an urgent meeting with the Israel Association Council in the context of our great concerns in respect of Israel's adherence to the human rights clauses in the Association Agreement, and particularly in the context of the ICJ provisional orders. It is no secret that Ireland has been pushing the European Union to act more decisively and at an earlier stage, and we will continue to do so. But I am encouraged that we are now beginning to see a clear view emerging amongst Member States that it is simply not credible that the EU-Israel Association Agreement can remain entirely unaffected by the behaviour of this Israeli government. Ceann, as this House is aware, the government has a long-standing commitment to the state of Palestine. A lasting settlement of the conflict, or in advance, doing so would progress efforts to reach a solution or protect the integrity of its territory. The government reason when we announced this alongside last week. I believe it is also important are also put in this House. Our recognition of Palestine, fundamental purpose. Our view that it is time Palestine takes its full place amongst the nations of the world, that its right to self-determination, self-governance and territorial integrity and sovereignty must now be vindicated. As the UN General Assembly agreed earlier this month, Palestine is ready of the state on. It is an expression of equal right to self-determination, security and dignity for Israelis and Palestinians alike. The aspirations of peoples must be afforded equal legitimacy based on a two-state solution that delivers a just and sustainable peace. Third, it is a reiteration of our fundamental conviction that the only just and sustainable peaceful solution for both Palestinians and Israelis is the implementation of that two-state solution, Israeli occupation of Palestine and resolving of an ambiguous Palestinian state in the West, Jerusalem, based on the 1967 border. The policies and actions of successive Israeli governments, in particular the current government, have seriously undermined the prospects of a two-state solution and the viability. Prime Minister has rejected even the concept of a Palestinian state. The urgency and integrity of territory has reached a point that our efforts to do so through the legal and policy avenues we have used to date were no longer sufficient. In particular, this is the result of the sustained Israeli assault on Gaza, specifically on the civilian population, as well as the denial of sufficient aid over a sustained time. In a significant increase of violence, displacement and annexation in parallel, there have been renewed international efforts, in particular by Arab pathway to implement its solution. Not to repeat a commitment to it, but to implement it. Officials have spent the last few months in constant contact with partners in the region, particularly Egypt and Jordan, as they have developed an Arab peace vision. This document prioritises concrete steps to end the brutal war in Gaza and to take concrete, irreversible steps to build a Palestinian state. The Arab peace vision recognises that any final settlement will, of course, need direct negotiations between the parties. We all agree on that. But importantly, it starts from the premise that no, not this government, not any government, can have a veto. Israel does not get a veto. Palestine is or not. I've spent the last few months under intensive discussions with partners on convened by in Saudi Arabia, over 40 partners elsewhere, with a focus on towards implementing the two states. Arab partners the underlying the Arab peace vision. The new Palestinian Prime Minister spoke about the vision that the is and the need for early and comprehensive support, delivery and reform. 6 foreign ministers then attended the yesterday and presented thinking in more detail. The European unanimously agreed to work with the Arab countries to add our ideas and suggest that European countries can be part of that. It is notable very that the Arab peace vision has its Arab countries recognized. As many of you know, with England and others have been discussing the issue in the last few months. In my view, that recognising Palestine would be most impactful if done in a coordinated manner with other partners. That we've taken the decision to recognise the state of Palestine together with Norway and Spain, and in the wider context of a regional peace initiative, is important. I am confident that there is a growing consensus among like-minded partners that Palestinian statehood can no longer wait until the end of a process of settlement negotiations between the parties. I anticipate others to raise Palestine in the coming weeks and months. I call it the challenge now. We need a fundamental paradigm in the international community view conflict. Steps. Many that a ceasefire, and full access are essential, and we will not until those are achieved. Simultaneously, that we support the Palestinian to the Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa in Sunday night. He highlighted a number of immediate priorities which I brought to the Foreign Affairs Council yesterday. I asked that the European Union increase pressure on Israel to release the tax revenues it is withholding from the Palestinian Authority, but also that the European Union Commission release pending funds immediately, as well as putting in place an ambitious and comprehensive support for 2020 and beyond. The High Representative invited Prime Minister Mustafa to present his program in detail to the Foreign Affairs Council. Pressed with Prime Minister Mustafa and his team, whom I met, it's on the conscience with Palestine the government having its capacity to try and the people of the world. Our own bilateral development with Palestine will of course continue and alongside support basis for the population of Gaza. We also move quickly to get the former EU assistance mission Rafa crossing operational again. The European Union plays a constructive in making a vital lifeline for goods between Egypt and Gaza open. Spain and Norway and our partners continue to build momentum behind the Arab peace vision. We will encourage others to recognise the state of Palestine, and we will work to build support for a comprehensive effort to bring an end to this conflict. We will continue to push in New York for full UN membership for Palestine, and we will continue to hold this Israeli government accountable. We will in the South Africa versus Israel case at the international. We work on prevention. Our most immediate focus is compliance by Israel with the provisional last week. At EU level to convene a meeting on the EU-Israel Association Agreement in this context is an important step in doing so. We will step up our support for the vital work of the International Criminal Court, even as the Minister and his staff sanctions. We must robustly uphold the independence of these international legal. Let me briefly address Alaska and Cora, the Israeli reaction to the decision taken by Ireland, Spain and Norway. In our private engagement with Israel, as well as in our public communication, we have been clear in setting out the thinking and motivation behind the decision to recognise. We support the right of the State of Palestine to exist and the right of the Palestinian people to peaceful self-determination, just as questions support exist self-determination. We understand that this Israeli government agrees with our decision. That is their right, as it is their right to inform us of their view, forthrightly and robustly, through diplomatic channels. We have no problem with that. However, the time and manner in which this was done was unacceptable. It may be that the ambassador nation short of respect from the country, irrespective of political differences. And I want to pay tribute to Ambassador Sonia McGuinness for her resilience and her outstanding performance as our ambassador in Israel during a very, very challenging time. I have, for my part, and will continue to treat Israel's ambassador to Ireland with courtesy and with respect. I expect the same in return. We wish to maintain functional diplomatic engagement and dialogue with Israel. Diplomacy comes into its own at times of intense disagreement between states. Imposing limitations on the Ireland-Israel diplomatic relations makes no sense, and we do not intend to do so. In my view, it would be a self-defeating mistake were the to decide. I also want to emphasise in the House what I stated clearly last week. Israeli and citizens alike are a valued part of our society here in Ireland, and I challenge and reject anyone who would seek to delegitimise either's history or beliefs. I also unambiguously reject those in Palestine, in Israel and the world who call for the entirety of the land between the Mediterranean Sea and the River to be a mono-ethnic state based either on forcible exile or subjugation. These are messages that I wish to convey clearly to the Israeli and Jewish communities here in Ireland, and I will be doing so personally in the very near future. Last Cola, there is more work ahead through both bilateral engagement, through continued advocacy, through building and reinforcing our friendship with the Israelis alike. This Irish commitment is unwavering, grounded in the resolution that we can together realise the aim that is overwhelmingly in the community, a two-state solution with the state of Israel, independent, democratic and sovereign of Palestine, leading peace and security, mutual recognition, Jerusalem serving as the future capital of both states. This may sound like an impossible aspiration, but there is no other just and sustainable option. We refuse to accept that the only future for Palestinians is and occupation and displacement and brutality. We refuse to believe that the only future for the Israeli and Palestinian people is a future of hatred, conflict and death. We cannot accept that, and we will not accept that. Thank you very much.
Orla. I was very party argued passionately for the record of Palestine in the program agreed with 2020. Then, tragically so, but the case for recognising Palestine was as strong back then as it is now. It wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when and to what effect. And today we deliver on that commitment as a government and as a parliament, and the timing, in my view, is important and right. Firstly, because we not comes after that vote in the United Nations on the 10th of May last, when 143 countries voted in favour of Palestine being recognised within the United Nations system. And secondly, punished as just said, the timing is important. Our peace plan yesterday has to it the benefit and the momentum to deliver a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire. And thirdly, the need for that ceasefire. The fact that we cannot stay silent, either on the release of hostages or what we saw the day before yesterday, the bombing of a refugee camp in Rafa, which is similar to what had happened right through the last 7 months. And critically as well, our timing of this recognition comes on the back of an application to the International Criminal Court for a warrant against the Israeli Prime Minister for actions that are taking place, and the International Court of Justice called similar to ourselves for an immediate end to the assault on Gaza. So today we recognise the state of Palestine, and I believe it has a particular relevance to Irish people because it brings from our own history. Right and proper thing to do. I know the it can be a fraught one. The population can disperse with others back and ethnicity is the concept motive. But there will be little that the people have an undeniable argument for nation. Denying such an obvious claim is unwise. It stores will ultimately happen. Some of the responses from the Palestinian people we've heard announced our intention have been moving. The need to ceasefire in Gaza remains without the challenge facing the people of Palestine. It has been heartening to hear the decision of Ireland, Spain and Norway has offered some solace to those who may have despaired that the international community have forgotten their plight. It's not merely to offer a sense of solidarity that we take this step. We recognise Palestine today because we recognise that peace cannot be achieved without doing so. Joseph Borrell, the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, put it well last November, that our political myopia has led us to think conflict is manageable by bringing leaders to the two solutions and then leaving it to fester. The West averted its gaze and was content to let the situation fail, as long as the uneasy peace continued, didn't intrude upon our lives. We learned that this tactic was not but strategic. We are unequivocal. Nothing can justify the barbaric slaughter on the 7th of October. Neither can any of us stand here and say that we never suspected that the powder keg that was Gaza would not experience such devastating consequences. That our recognition represents a challenge for Jewish people in Israel and across the world, and I ask our Jewish friends with real respect that you look to our experience here on this island, where the long-term denial of one community's rights in favour of another's led to similar misery and devastation. Such an indication for decades, maybe longer, people's right to exist suppressed. Let me also say to Israel, the recognise your rights to exist as a nation, recognising Palestine not in any way diminish your rights as a state. Our dearest wish that the establishment solidifies your existence and allows you to prosper and flourish in peace and harmony with your neighbours. I particularly want to offer reassurance to Jewish friends living here in Ireland. The last 7 months have not been easy, and many maybe feel that there's a change in attitude towards them, people of their religion. We need to assure them they come here, they belong here, they are as Irish as all of us. They're respected and a part of our citizenship. Long may be Ireland, so they can make their outstanding contribution to our nation in science, in business, and in politics. This House has benefited so much from people from our Jewish community. I share their frustration at the one-sided approach that some people take to the conflict. There are some who appear to think that Israel's government's appalling actions mean that Hamas's atrocities. I do not. Not a sides. The atrocities of innocent Israelis on the 7th of October were vile. Slaughter that the Israeli forces have unleashed Palestinians both wrong, and we are vociferous in condemning both. Outside government building Wednesday that we had learned way of using innocent civilians to try and achieve political goals can and must never win. Whether on the streets of Omagh or Jerusalem, be it a landing in Tel Aviv or a no-warming bomb blast in Birmingham, be that the assault on a kibbutz or a bomb dropped from a jet fighter onto a refugee camp in Gaza, it is all wrong. There is no hierarchy in death. I would like to conclude by responding to criticism that has been levelled at us by the Israeli government that by recognising Palestine that we are somehow emboldening the terrorists of Hamas and that this decision will only lead us further down the path of violence. Again, I think valuable lessons can be taken from the Irish experience. There was a time, after all, when similar warnings were made by the British establishment that the Irish were not fit to govern themselves and that they should follow if we were given the chance. The path to Irish statehood wasn't smooth, but over century on, our warning, the nation that we represent in this chamber, I think, stands up for the rights of the United Nations, the rights of individual nations, stands up to try and help build peace in a troubled, conflict-ridden world. If allowed to, and with support from around the world, I pray that Palestine could in time follow a similar path to our own. There will no doubt be missteps, just as we have made, and setbacks undoubtedly, but the only path forward involves recognising that Palestine too has an unalienable right to take place in the international community. What I ask for us is not outrageous, preventing it is modest. As the Palestinians say, it is no moment that any of us would ask for ourselves. The line he wrote is saying, she may be allowed to be free from security, terror and oppression, free also from the ability of exercising unequal or unjust domination over others. Today we recognise Palestine as a state. We commit to working with our European colleagues here in government, across the aisles, I'm sure, in this House, to do everything we can to support an immediate safety of the assault in Gaza and ceasefire. We have our two-state solution, which is the only path to peace.
Thank you, Minister.
Good morning, we Palestinians take life after they occupied the land. We built their apartheid walls, glass skies. We Palestinians are to teach the rest of the world life, sir. These are the words of Palestinian poet Rafa Ziada, words that powerfully captured the cry of Palestine to the world, a cry that has reverberated for generations. See us, stand, our nation and our people recognise. Today, the Irish government comes to the justice and becomes one of the first Western European countries to recognise the state of Palestine. People of Ireland have always stood with the Palestinian people in their struggle for freedom, self-determination, human dignity and peace. Conscious of our own history of colonisation, of oppression, dispossession, famine and partition. A history that has ingrained in the collective consciousness the impetus to confront injustice and inequality, human rights abuse across the world. So today we say again, people, you are not alone. Ireland recognises your people and your right to nation. We stand on the side of a lasting peace. Recognition of the Palestinian state comes of Gaza, darkest of moments, to endure on an unimaginable scale. World leaders continue to false empower and the oppressive occupier. By recognizing the state, we recognise the right of Palestinians to their homeland, the right to a future free of oppression and war. We recognise the human rights of the Palestinian people to exist as equals in this world. Today's announcement has been a long time coming, too long. 10 years ago, the Dáil voted unanimously in favour of a Sinn Féin motion for the state of Palestine. We had cross-party support for this. shouldn't have taken us this year. Of course, it is never too late to do the right thing, and this is the right and the just thing. And to acknowledge the incredible of the current Palestine of all her predecessors. Long before I was ever elected to the Dáil, I stood with so many others outside the gates of Leinster House, calling on, imploring the government and the European Union justice for activists have in their Palestine, standing ground, standing up for what is right, and surely conversation. So I want to pay to activists the length and breadth of this country and who for decades have marched, protested and rallied in solidarity with Palestine, and whose steadfast effort has brought us to this day.
Hear, hear.
The Palestinian struggle has gone on for generations. The catastrophe of Nakba was only the start. 76 years, the story of Palestine has been one of colonisation, occupation, apartheid, violent, brutal human rights atrocities at the hands of the Israeli state and its ferocious military. Daily oppression that Palestinians killed, jailed, tortured and forced hands. As violently over in direct violation of international law. Palestine is a nation threatened by annihilation. The world was always going to face a moment of reckoning on Palestine, and as Israel continues its brutal onslaught on the refugee population of Gaza, launch horrific attack on Rafa, I believe the moment of reckoning is now. Rafa is the place where hundreds of thousands of Gazans were forcefully displaced in the wakes of Israel's initial bombardment. There is nowhere left for them to flee, nowhere left to go. They are trapped. And on refugee tent and took countless lives. They described reports that more taken in Israel in Rafa, and there is more slaughter unless Israel is confronted. A child is the same as a child in the world. We ask, where is the protection of international law for a child killed in Gaza? A child who will be Rafa. We've all seen images of heartbroken Palestinian mothers weeping over their dead children. Their entire world collapsed forever into tiny white sheets. Fathers desperately digging their children out of rubble, knowing that they have breathed their last. Little girls horrifically injured, covered in debris, rushed to hospitals that are with the maimed. Is a on the young under the age of 18. You've all endured 4 military bombardments. For 8 months, Netanyahu war on the world has looked the other way. This annihilation is the cruel crescendo of occupation and apartheid. This October, 6,000 Palestinians, 15,000 children. So this is not a moment of an intense disagreement between states. Rather, this is a moment of savagery, of an Israel that has every international and as and for this international community has act. The European Union, Britain, the United States of America must remove political support, preferential treatment for Israel as it perpetrates crimes against the Palestinians with impunity. They must stop funding and arming the Israeli military machine as it commits genocide in Palestine. The ordinary people of Europe, I believe, don't want a European Commission that shamefully endorses Israel's action. And I'm conscious we'll have a new European Parliament and a new Commission. And I do not believe that a Commission or a President of the Commission can the actions of Israel. Rather, they must confront them. They must insist. Today, along with Norway, we take a lead. But recognition of the Palestinian state can't be the end. It has to be just a beginning, a new departure in pursuing freedom and justice for the Palestinians. The Irish government must now follow recognition by enacting the Occupied Territories Bill, and we have Senator Francis Black joining us here, and the Israeli illegal settlement divestment bill brought forward by my colleague Deputy Brady. We also have to take the lead in the European Union, pushing for sanctions against Israel, holding Israel to account by joining the ICJ genocide case. Israel, for now, turns its case against the rule of international law, and therefore a movement to apartheid Palestine with the same momentum and the same movement against is essential. It's vital to secure the enforcement of international law. An immediate ceasefire. We need to turn the This is the only way the children of Palestine have the future of peace they deserve. Young people in particular have stepped forward, standing for freedom. They've marched in cities and towns throughout Ireland and the world, calling for an end to the slaughter and an immediate ceasefire. On college campuses throughout the world, they've stood together against Israeli war crimes. And world listen to the voice of the young, because this is right. Our recognition of the Palestinian, but the real power of today will only be to what happens next. This must be Ireland's first step in pushing for an end to Israeli occupation, apartheid, an end to their human rights violations. Because Palestinians wake up every day not knowing if it'll be their last. Palestinians wake up every day to teach the rest of the world life. They cry out for freedom, for justice, for human dignity. They cry out for life. Ireland and the world must see that they have it.
I welcome the Palestinian community and campaigners for justice to the days that mark an historic moment for Ireland and Palestine. The decision to officially recognise the state of Palestine fulfils a Dáil mandate that is now almost a decade old. It was in December 2014 that the members of this House adopted the Sinn Féin motion that called on the then government to take this step. Better later than never, of course. When the then Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams proposed that motion, it was in the aftermath of the 2014 bombardment of Gaza that resulted in the killing of 51 Palestinians. Later. What we had since is yet another lost decade when the world to the endless violation of international laws perpetrated against the people of Palestine. During the 2014 bombardment, the world, as playing football on a beach in Gaza, were deliberately targeted and bombed by the IDF. The world did nothing. Irish governments, often saying the right thing, did nothing. It was the same in 2015 when Amnesty International documented 20 cases of unlawful killings of Palestinians. And in October that year, Jihad Youssef Ershad, with her arm, was shot by strong, sometimes no action. In 2016, when the world was settlement in West and the impact of the brutal blockade in Gaza was stayed mute. Irish failed to all decision to recognise the state of Palestine. It's time, we were told. Better than ever. 2017, Human Rights report to the International Criminal Court outlining officials were complicit in committing war crimes against the people of Palestine. Again, world leaders stayed silent. They described Israel as the only democracy in the Middle East. Some, including Irish ministers, called for restraint in settlement. But as the occupation continued and the blockade intensified, Israel faced a single consequence. In their attempt to draw international attention to the impact of the blockade, throughout 2018 and 2019, Palestinians in Gaza engaged in what they called the Great March of Return. They were doing what we across the world had told them way to help their cause. They were engaged in peaceful, non-violent protest. Israel 203 of them, including Yasser Abu who was shot by friends. Was a slogan that described themselves as the most powerful army in the world. And it wasn't the right time to recognise that Yasser's state existed. In 2020, when Israel was continuing to benefit from the most preferential trading, economic and diplomatic relationships with the Western world, international leaders ignored the appeals of UN human rights experts when they called for an independent investigation killing of 15-year-old Ali Abman Abu Alia, who had become the 6th Palestinian child to be killed by Israel that year. And on and on and on it went. The Gaza bombardment of 2021 that left 254 dead, including 67 children. The regular brutal attacks on refugee camps, including the attack on Jenin camp and the targeted sniper journalists. IDF. Decades has called for the recognition there have been Israel's disregard of national law and the lives of Palestinians and the refusal of world leaders to hold accountable for their war crimes. I'm immensely proud that this has happened. I'm proud not of any politician, I'm proud of the people in the gallery who forced it to happen. I'm proud of the thousands of Irish people who marched, who campaigned, who have refused to allow us to turn the other way. I'm proud of those Palestinians who have shared their story with the people of Ireland. We, in turn, have taken them to our hearts. Lost decade. Said to do the things better than now, because it was as a result of inaction. Attack of innocent over the 7th, them over and over again. But start 73. They provide justification for the war crimes committed by Israel every day since. As we today declare that Ireland recognises the state of Palestine, we do against the backdrop of over 36,000 Palestinians having been killed by Israel in Gaza, including more than 15,000 children in just 7 months. So let us declare as well today that there will be no more lost decades, lost years, opportunities. Genocide, because history do so with states like the right thing, but not do other powerful states complicit in every action conducted under the Israeli flag. Prosecuted National Criminal now sought arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu. The International Court of Justice now considers a charge of genocide and has ordered Israel to cease the attacks on Rafa. Ireland, Norway and Spain officially recognise the state of Palestine. All better later than never. But today is not an end, it's just a beginning. A international chorus to the savagery of Israel against women, men and children of that demands an end to apartheid, their bombings. If we say Palestine has a right to it, we must take action against those who are determined to destroy that objective. The international law, then we cannot trade with a state that breaches it every single day. If we say that the lives of Palestinian children have worth, then we cannot engage in diplomatic niceties with the state that is murdering them. We know that action is better taken later rather than never. But we know at some stage there will be no later. This is the last chance. If there is to be a free, sovereign Palestine, then we must act now. No more wasted decades, no more lost opportunities, no more excuses. Now is the right time for Israel, arming Israel, stop the economic support for Israel, stop the war, stop the genocide, because it is too many Palestinians. It's better later than never. It is a historic day, but it's just a beginning.
Just like to welcome the Palestinian ambassador here today with us. Because today is an important day for Ireland in recognising the state of Palestine. It is the right thing to do. Ireland's formal recognition of the state of Palestine firmly reflects support and solidarity for Palestine by the people of Ireland. And I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of members of Irish Sport for Palestine in the gallery and all the work that they do. Ireland, along with Spain and Norway, stood up against the shameful action. For years we have witnessed the inaction and silence from the EU. EU trade with Israel. Israel unleashed a brutal system of on the people line. 10 years after the Dáil vote, Sinn Féin motion calling for Ireland to officially recognise the state of Palestine, it is shameful that it has taken the murder of 36,000 Palestinians in the current phase of slaughter by Israel before we recognise Palestinian statehood. Today is welcome and important. It's really important that politics is seen to work. If politics doesn't work, we need that politics has failed Palestinians. Ensure that the government has priority to the state of Palestine for another 10 years, while thousands more die at the hands of the Israelis. We must see taking sanction of Israel. We need Francis Black's by bill and the Sinn Féin Israeli Settlement Bill 2023. Both have to have immense impact on apartheid Israel. It is vital that we see bills enacted as a matter of urgency. And while today is a historic day, our eye must be on Rafa right now. We must ensure that we do all we can to halt the genocide being inflicted on those seeking shelter and safety in Rafa.
And I also want to welcome the ambassador and also to the campaigners in the gallery and also the ones outside Leinster House today. I'm proud on this historic day as Ireland finally recognises the state of Palestine. Years since the Dáil, recognise Palestine. It should not have taken 10 years. It did. Now, for not the first time, the Irish people are ahead of the Irish government. The Irish people have always recognised Palestine. For decades, people of Ireland have wholeheartedly stood side by side with the Palestinian freedom and justice. A struggle that we know only too well. Both Ireland history of struggle against partition and oppression. So today Leinster House joins thousands I should say, of ordinary houses right across Ireland who have always flown the Palestinian flag for decades. But recognition is historic. It must not be the end. Words without sanctions are absolutely futile. The Irish government must now take the steps Palestinian people to avoid and free. Must sanction Israel for their own gross violations. Must enact the Israeli investment bill. It must join the against Israel, and it must increase funding to UNRWA. Israel must be held to account. Israel must face sanctions. No more excuses. Ireland must use our position to persuade and pressurise the European Government and Union to act. The EU has any meaningful action. The Commission has provided cover for Israeli war crimes. What we are witnessing right now is ethnic war crime. This is genocide. This week, the Palestinians who moved to a so-called safe zone were bombed out of existence. Children were burnt alive as they slept. It is beyond words. The people of Gaza have nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Imagine the torture of knowing that each moment could be our last as the bombs rain down. And if they survive the bombs, they wait to face starvation and famine. This famine is man-made. The Israel blockade must be lifted right now. A ceasefire must happen right now. And America must stop supplying Israel with the arms.
Let's concord at the outset. I'd like to congratulate the government on taking this decision. It is of historic significance for the government pressure not to do so. Ireland once sought international recognition, and so we are proud today to stand with Palestine and to help them take their place amongst the nations of the world. I would like to commend the Taoiseach in particular for the manner in which he has represented the views of the Irish people in recent months. We don't have to agree on every point to appreciate the sincerity with which he has approached this issue. However, the recognition of the State of Palestine is not enough. It will not save lives in itself. I found it particularly poignant to hear the voice of a little Palestinian child in the gallery earlier. The Palestinian people need an immediate and permanent ceasefire. The hostages must man-made famine and injured civilians can be stemmed if Israel stops blocking humanitarian aid into Gaza. The EU can and must act by suspending the trade agreement with Israel. The EU is Israel's largest trading partner, with 32% of Israel's imports coming from the EU. And the Irish government can send a further message of solidarity by passing the Occupied Territories Bill to ban any goods and services produced in Israeli-occupied settlements in the West Bank. However, the reality is that with unparalleled influence in Gaza to an end, Biden to do better. We know things about peace, that if there is to be peace, it has to be premised on the absence of violence. We know that if there is to be peace, there has to be compromise. We know that if there is to be peace, then one side cannot win absolutely. And in this context, you cannot have a two-state solution to this problem without a state of Palestine. But you cannot have a two-state solution either without a state of Israel. Awful catastrophe from October 7th onwards for new and fresh horror. The scale of the loss is simply horrific. It is gut-wrenching. It is anger-inducing. The decision of the Irish state, along with those of European friends in Spain and in Norway, to join with many other countries in recognising the state of Palestine, it is an important one. It is symbolic, but in and of itself, it will not save a single Palestinian life. Only Israel can do that. And we understand that Israel itself feels under siege. We understand too that for historical reasons, Israel has understandable sensitivity to its place in the world. And we know that Israel finds it hard to understand that when we in Ireland look at this problem, that we see primarily not Israeli and Gazans, but David and Goliath. What has taken place in recent months has added to Israel's insecurity. You cannot eliminate Hamas by perpetuating the grievance that sustains its existence. To begin to put in place an end to this tragedy and this conflict, we need a peace. The career of a allowed necessity. President Biden, in many ways, has had a remarkable presidency on this issue. The conflict in and over Gaza, the United States and President Biden have not had the courage of their convictions. President Biden knows that there is no long-term security for Israel that does not cater to the national aspirations of the Palestinians. You cannot advocate by word if those words are not matched by deeds. You cannot and should not protect an Israeli state that is not open to a genuine attempt to relaunch the peace process. You cannot do good while ignoring or cajoling a bad faith actor, because we know that whilst tragedy unfolds on a daily basis in Gaza, the geographical basis for the two-state solution is being undermined by extremist settlers in the West Bank. And in the face of sheer horror of the last few months, there is only one legitimate response by the international community: try again, try harder, try seriously. So I say to you, President Biden, from these houses, discreet phone calls to try and rein in Netanyahu isn't global leadership. Your current approach is shortening it. Evidence shows that your strategy is contributing to the loss of life in Gaza and elsewhere. And to you and to incoming UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, I say this: you know Ireland well. You know our peace process too well to think that you have one going on in Israel and Palestine, and you've got to do better than that. Others stand to help in good faith, but you have to lead, and a Labour Prime Minister in the UK must also lead. Without a peace initiative involving the United States, UK and the EU, we will witness the continuing brutalisation, impoverishment and radicalisation of the Gazan people. And I fear we will have to witness more of the horrific scenes from Rafa that shook everyone to the core this weekend. This war on the people of Gaza will not bring security to Israel. It will only create another generation, brutally orphaned by war and intent on revenge. The longer Israel continues its in Gaza, the further we get from peace. Since mid-October, we have witnessed the entire population of Gaza herded from pillar to post, increasingly desperate for food, shelter and medical aid. Aid has become a negotiating card, not a humanitarian priority. And the basic infrastructure of a functioning society, hospitals, schools, playgrounds, has been systematically razed to the ground. This is the intentional destruction of the Gazan people and their society, an attempt to bomb them into hand-to-mouth existence. It is collective punishment of an entire people for the crimes of Hamas. It is genocide. It is a moral outrage, and Israel has to stop. Last week, we joined with our EU partner, Spain, and our European partner, Norway, in recognising the state of Palestine. We also know that other European states, such as Portugal and Slovenia, for instance, are in favour of recognition in principle and are seeking a broader EU consensus before making further moves. This only serves yet again to underscore how dangerous and arrogant Ursula von der Leyen's actions last autumn were. She does not represent the people of Ireland or the millions of Europeans who have marched to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. She does not represent the people of Ireland. Her credibility amongst people across the European Union is at zero. And at the time of her visit to Israel last autumn, we knew we were on the brink of a disproportionate Israeli military response engendering a humanitarian crisis on an unprecedented scale. In short, we knew that thousands of Gazans would be killed and injured by the Israeli military, yet she said she stood with Israel. Her unilateral decision to give a blank cheque to the Netanyahu government was reckless, senseless and immoral. Ursula von der Leyen has lost all moral authority. She cannot lead the European Commission for another term. So in conclusion, I'll ask Concordia, last week was a proud day for Ireland. I would like to pay tribute to those in campaign groups across Ireland who have kept the flame of peace alive over the decades and who have highlighted the plight of the Gazan people. However, our work in this House and beyond cannot stop at symbols. As I mentioned earlier, there are practical steps that Ireland and the EU can take to put pressure on Israel for a ceasefire. And most importantly, we have to use our influence to lay the foundations for peace that delivers dignity to the people of Israel. We know it is possible. We know the first step is ceasefire, and that ceasefire, and we should lead in demanding an international boycott of the Israeli state on all fronts, on all levels, until that ceasefire begins and steps through a process of peace begins. To Palestinians in Ireland, your existence is your resistance, recognised here today.
It's a very significant when a state formally recognises another. And it didn't really hit home for me today, was until the Palestinian national flag flying years ago. To recognise the state of program for government, never thought it would be under such circumstances. Nevertheless, this formal expression is hugely significant. I know time working in Palestine that the Palestinian people look forward in ways, and this is the state of Palestine have on the hopes that Palestinians have for peace and for justice. Since office, I have endeavoured to use my role whenever possible to support the protection of human rights in Palestine. When Palestinian human rights organisations were blacklisted by the IDF, I visited the West Bank and met with them and publicly declared support for their mission. I met with the ICJ, I've met with the ICC, and I've met with UNRWA in Brussels and Geneva, again publicly support. And I'm proud that Ireland was first out in their defence. At the time, I wrote to ambassadors of all funding, and I urged the remaining countries to follow suit. This movement against UNRWA is a bigger issue. There is another war in parallel, and that is the war being waged on human rights, international, also, and in particular, against institutions that endeavour to protect and uphold them. The International Court of Justice is one of those institutions. It's one of the 6 organs of the nations. Its decisions are binding. And let's just recap on some of the orders over the last 5 months that the ICJ has made. Initially, in January, the ICJ announced that Israel must take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide. In March, one of the orders to take all necessary measures to ensure humanity, increasing passing. And just recently, last week, this military offensive and any action in the government. We all know Israel has viewed people not familiar with the nation of Palestine might not be aware of decades of impunity that is built war on. And it is this impunity that must change if we expect a different outcome to the long-standing conflict. There must be consequences. It's important to recap that in February, former Taoiseach Varadkar and the Spanish Prime Minister wrote to President von der Leyen to request a review of the human rights clause in the EU-Israel Association Agreement. And frankly, what has followed has been a level of disregard for national agreements and human rights that is hugely damaging to the people, but damages the credibility of the international institutions. If the EU does not at least rarely suspend the agreement, it is de facto supporting regard for international agreements, international law, the ICC, the UN and the ICC, which have been under attack of late. It's vital that we defend and protect the international institutions that endeavour to maintain a basic and legal order internationally. Their legitimacy is under attack, and we should be very worried about this, not just in the context of Israel's actions in Gaza, but going forward. Other international actors are watching closely to see how far Israel can go without major consequence and to see how much these vital international institutions are undermined. I want to acknowledge the role that civil society has played in Palestine in keeping hope alive among everyday Palestinians. I also want to acknowledge civil society justice in pushing for true rights, experiences of. I want to acknowledge the Bohemians Football Club organised the national women's team, and anyone there on will absolutely understand that expressions of solidarity do impact people and their hopes. And a varied civil society plays an important role in expressing public opinion in an open democracy. And I want to acknowledge the efforts of the Students' Union in Trinity College in what they have achieved. Civil society plays an important role in sparking change, and I feel there is more potential for civil society to spark change with cross-societal agreement with unions, businesses. I think we can go further in nationally expressing our respect for human rights for people of Gaza.
Thank you. Please. Thank you. I'm going to suspend. The door is suspended.